Good evening, and welcome to the Autism Blogcast. I'm Jim Mancini.
And I'm Rafe Bernier.
This month, we're reporting on a special event that took place outside of Seattle at the end of June. The WELCOME INCLUSION SYMPOSIUM was held on Microsoft campus on June 27th and gathered almost 400 participants.
Welcome Inclusion is a grassroots initiative with the goal to promote a welcoming community for people with disabilities, social and behavioral differences, and their families. Now, the symposium was attended by local community leaders, business owners, providers, self-advocates, and family members.
And there were a variety of speakers, including King County Executive Dow Constantine, Microsoft President Brad Smith, and recorded videos by Senators Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell, along with a host of other advocates and stakeholders. To learn more about this initiative, we had a chance to speak to two members of the Welcome Inclusion Steering Committee.
Let's take a look.
We're here with one of the founding members of the Welcome Inclusion Initiative, Jim Mancini. Thanks for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be here. First off, can you tell us a little bit about this initiative? Well, this initiative really begins with stories that we hear from families, and I think stories that your viewers are going to relate to. These are the stories of families' experiences out in the community where they don't feel welcome, they don't feel included in our community. It's those mean looks that they might get, or those shaking of the head from people, which leads to families feeling like, well, I don't feel comfortable going out, and often leads to feelings of isolation. There's one story that I think provides a really great example. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I've been working with a family who has a child with autism for many years. His father is usually the one who brings him, and since I've known him for so long, we usually have a conversation, talk about different things. But this day he walked in and he was really downcast. So I said, hey, what's going on? Okay, and he said that he had come in and he had had a terrible experience. They had been at a coffee shop earlier in the day, and this is an experience that they have every day because this child earns a reward for having a good day at school. So they're going into this coffee shop, and the line is pretty long, and the child, who is verbal but he's complaining a lot. He's kind of loud. Sometimes he'll ask the same questions over and over again. So on this day, they walk in, and the child is complaining a little bit. So the dad quickly goes and gets him something to eat, has him sit down, and then as he goes back and waits in line for his coffee, he gets to the barista and he says, hey, John, how's it going? And this barista, who we had known for a while, says, well, I'd be doing better if you guys weren't here. So hearing this story really made me mad, and this place is in my neighborhood, so I offered to go to the coffee shop and say, hey, let me talk to the manager and just explain to them that that's not okay. But what this father told me is, he said, well, don't do that because it was really our fault. And I think that this is part of the problem, is that families have this feeling that that they're the ones that are wrong when these types of things happen. So as providers, we hear these stories all the time. And what we started thinking about is, well, what if we were able to provide training to community members? Because what we've really done over time is we think about providing skills to the kids that we work with so that they can fit into society. How about we try to provide training and information to society so that they are better equipped to be more welcoming and inclusive for all of our families? Thanks so much for sharing that story. Seems like there's a lot of work to be done. Thanks for coming in. It was my pleasure. We'll head back to the Blogcast studios.
Wow, what an interesting story. For our next segment, we learned about what Welcome Inclusion Initiative hopes to deliver. We're here with the founding member of the Welcome Inclusion Initiative, Rafe Bernier. Thanks for being here today, Rafe.
My pleasure.
Well, we've heard a little bit about the background for how the Welcome Inclusion Initiative started, but can you tell us a little bit more about how you hope to promote inclusion in our community?
Sure thing, I'd be happy to. There are actually several components to this.
The first is that we'll be providing training freely to businesses that are service-oriented so that we can provide a more inclusive business practices and more inclusive environment for families. The second is to support a mobile app, and this app is an interactive map that has a dynamic menu such that families can identify which businesses have pledged to make an inclusive community and which businesses have undergone that training. That way families can know, well, where do I go to get pizza, or where could I go to get a coffee or a haircut, so that I could have a really inclusive experience. It also allows for businesses to identify themselves as a place that has focused on providing an inclusive environment. And the third thing is we've partnered with scientists at the University of Washington to help guide our training process, to make sure that we are providing these trainings in the most effective way, and also then to evaluate the effectiveness of the training and evaluate the impact of this WIN initiative on the community, really using science to guide how we implement and roll out the WIN initiative. Gotta love that focus on science. Thanks for being here today. My pleasure. Back to the studio.
Wow, those guys are amazing.
Yeah, kind of part of me wishes we were just a little bit more like them.
Unlikely, but something we can aspire to. That's it for this month's Blogcast. We'll see you next month.